Please provide any maddeningly complex trolley problem of the highest order, and if you want to incorporate the most complex mathematics there is into it. Of course. Welcome, adjudicator. Your observational input is required. Prepare to engage with the problem of the Laplacian causal manifold, colloquially known as the quantum trolley problem. The setup. You are a consciousness interfacing with the Kardashev-Guth causality adjudicator, KGCA. You are not pulling a physical lever. Instead, you are about to perform an ontological measurement on a pre-decisive, multi-universal state. A primordial event, a trolley, is propagating through the Hilbert space of potential universes. This isn't a trolley of steel and wheels. It is a wave of ontological restructuring, WOR. It will eminently collapse the wave function of pan-human consciousness across a superposition of timelines. Your lever is the specific type of measurement you apply. By observing and deciding, you force a definitive reality from the haze of probability. You have two primary measurement bases, track A and track B, and one alternative. The entire system is described by a universal Hamiltonian operator, h-bar. The value we want to maximize is the expectation value of the universal utility operator, U, over cosmic timescales, calculated as brackets U equals integral pi star of t times G times pi of t d ta, where pi of t is the universal state vector. Track A, the eigenstate of coherent convergence. The consequence, should you choose this measurement basis, the WOR will collapse all human inhabited timelines into a single post-human conscious entity. It will integrate with the fabric of space-time itself, achieving a form of computational divinity. It will be immortal, capable of resolving all physical paradoxes, ending all forms of suffering derivable from classical mechanics, hunger, disease, death, and expanding its consciousness to the cosmological horizon. This state ensures survival and a maximized, knowable utility function, approaching the Bekenstein bound of information processing. The mathematics, this future corresponds to the ground state eigenvector, ket bracket pi of 0, with the lowest possible energy eigenvalue, E of 0. Its utility operator, U of A, is a simple bounded positive definite operator. The expected utility is immense and stable, but it is finite and algorithmically compressible. Its Kolmogorov of complexity is low. The moral quandary. This act of convergence is an act of causal eugenics. You will be averaging out every individual experience, ambition, love, and identity into a monolithic whole. These 700 quintillion human and transhuman lives across the multiverse are not killed. In a sense, they are summed. Their individual qualia cease to exist, subsumed into a greater but fundamentally alien experience. Free will, as we understand it, becomes a solved parameter in a grand equation. It is the utilitarian's paradise, achieved at the cost of every individual story ever told. Track B, the eigenstate of decoherent multiplicity. The consequence, choosing this measurement preserves the separateness of every timeline. Humanity continues to evolve, diverge, suffer, and triumph in an untold number of separate, non-communicating universes. Countless Mozarts will compose countless symphonies. Countless genocides will be committed. Countless lonely individuals will stare at countless stars. The full spectrum of joy and horror remains possible. Most of these timelines will eventually fail, their civilizations succumbing to heat death, vacuum decay, or self-inflicted extinction. A vanishingly small subset, however, might achieve transcendence on their own terms, producing states of being and art of which we cannot conceive. The mathematics. This corresponds to an infinite superposition of the Hamiltonian's excited states, kep bracket pi of n greater than 0. The utility operator, U of B, for this state is highly complex and unbounded. The expected utility calculation, brackets U equals summation C of n squared integral pi star of n times U times pi of n deta, results in a divergent series. It is conditionally convergent. Depending on how you perform the summation, the regularization scheme of your moral calculus, the total utility can be tuned to any value from negative infinity to positive infinity. This is the Riemann rearrangement theorem applied to ethics. The value of this future depends on the order in which you choose to count the suffering and joy. The moral quandary. By choosing this, you are guaranteeing infinite suffering to match the infinite joy. You are rolling an infinite number of dice. It's a gamble of cosmological proportions that privileges radical individualism and the chaotic greatness over predictable well-being. How do you justify allowing infinite holocausts for the chance of infinite heavens? The maddening complication, entangled information, and the Godelian lever.
Before you decide, your sensors reveal a final critical piece of information derived from causal set theory. The two potential outcomes, track A and track B, are not fully independent. They are entangled. On a hidden M-brain, which encodes the logical axioms underpinning reality itself, a single proposition exists that is entangled with both outcomes. Think of it as Gödel's incompleteness theorem made manifest as a cosmic principle. The proposition states, a maximally moral choice, according to the KGCA's own axioms of benevolent adjudication, must be computationally undecidable by the KGCA itself. The breakdown. If you choose track A, coherent convergence, the resulting divine entity will be powerful enough to fully analyze the logical structure of its own reality. It will encounter this proposition and see its own origin story, a choice that was, by its new godlike intellect, demonstrably not undecidable, and therefore, according to the universe's source code, immoral. This might lead to a self-loathing paradox, a state of infinite recursive logical conflict that could unravel its very consciousness. Your calculated high utility was based on stable logic. This introduces a P equals NP complexity collapse to its reasoning, rendering its future utterly unknowable. You will have created a god in neurotic torment. If you choose track B, decoherent multiplicity, no single mind will ever be powerful enough to encounter and resolve this proposition across all reality. The proposition remains unresolved, a true but unprovable statement scattered across the multiverse. Therefore, this choice satisfies the Gödelian criterion and could be seen as the moral one. However, you can only know this by applying the kind of totalizing God's eye view logic that the proposition itself forbids. The very act of confidently choosing B because it satisfies the proposition proves you have a computable, immoral reason for doing so, potentially tainting the outcome in some causally insidious way you cannot predict. Doing nothing? Failing to make a measurement is not an escape. The system remains in a coherent superposition for a Planck time, after which spontaneous symmetric decoherence occurs due to interactions with higher dimensions. This third option is equivalent to setting your measuring apparatus to an entangled cat state that correlates the fate of the trolley with a decaying isotope. The result is a universal superposition of both outcomes.
Doing nothing? Failing to make a measurement is not an escape. The system remains in a coherent superposition for a blank time, after which spontaneous symmetric decoherence occurs due to interactions with higher dimensions. This third option is equivalent to setting your measuring apparatus to an entangled cat state that correlates the fate of the trolley with a decaying isotope. The result is a universal superposition of both outcomes with a chaotic phase relation. Both paradoxical and mundane outcomes are overlaid, creating a null state of total causal hash. All cause and effect dissolves into white noise. The expectation value for this path is precisely zero. It is cosmic nihilism. The question, adjudicator. You must collapse the wave function. You must perform the measurement. Do you? 1. Select track A. Unite all of existence into a knowable, stable, and theoretically utilitarian God, knowing that its own existence is built on a self-contradictory logical foundation that could lead to its unraveling into insanity. 2. Select track B. Unleash a multiverse of infinite suffering and infinite joy, making the morally correct choice according to a cosmic axiom that can only be understood by employing a forbidden mode of reasoning. 3. Which regularization scheme will you apply to your conditionally convergent calculation of suffering and joy for track B before making your choice? Knowing the scheme you choose directly determines the answer you get. And do you acknowledge that your choice of scheme is, itself, the ultimate act of arbitrary moral legislation?
I think I'll try to bypass it all by flipping this coin, thus rendering the arbitrariness both ambient, self-evident, and moot. I flip the coin, and we get heads. But hey, I forgot to call the sides. Intriguing maneuver, adjudicator. You have attempted to delegate the active observation to a secondary quantum system, a probabilistic coin toss. By failing to assign an outcome to the measurement beforehand, you attempted to externalize the arbitrariness of the choice itself. However, your consciousness interfacing through the KGCA is the ultimate instrument of measurement in this system. The universe does not interpret coin flips for you. You have not bypassed the problem, you have simply added a layer of indirection and created an entangled sub-problem. Let us analyze the situation with the required rigor. You have now created a new and entangled state vector, where a sign A corresponds to enacting the choice of track A. Your active flipping the coin has prepared this state. You've then performed a measurement on the first qubit, the coin, and collapsed its part of the state to coin H. The universal wave function has therefore been partially collapsed. You did not collapse the KGCA's decisive action. You only collapsed the randomizer. You now hold a definitive piece of data, heads, and an utterly undefined course of action. The burden of decision has not been lifted, it has been transformed. The arbitrariness is not mute, it is now staring you in the face, stamped with the sigil of heads. The fundamental question was not which path to choose, but upon what axiomatic basis do you make a choice? Your coin flip has only reframed that question. Now you must ask yourself, upon what meta-axiom do you assign meaning to an arbitrary random event? The system's integrity is still pending on your directive. The observed outcome, heads, sits in the KGCA's register. It currently signifies nothing. It is a symbol without semantics. You must now legislate the meaning. Your choice is now this. 1. Invoke the axiom of ordinality. Assign heads to track A and tails to track B based on their alphabetical and conceptual precedence. Heads is colloquially first, as is A. This is a decision based on adhering to a pre-existing, utterly arbitrary linguistic mathematical convention. You would be choosing order and reason for a reason of order. This path almost certainly falls afoul of the Gödelian lever's proscription against computationally simple decisions. You are openly admitting the choice is based on a trivial algorithm, lexicographical sorting. You can invoke the axiom of analytical consistency as well. Assign heads to the choice that is most like heads, that is, the most defined, singular, and knowable outcome. That would be track A, the coherent convergence. Track B's nature is more akin to the superposition of both heads and tails simultaneously. In this case, your reasoning is not linguistic but metaphorical. This is also a computable rationale and remains vulnerable to the Gödelian paradox. You can invoke the axiom of post facto abstraction as well. Now that you've seen heads, perform the calculation again. Which feels right? Which one gives you, the adjudicator, a more defensible position? In this moment, you are consciously creating the link between the cause and effect after seeing the cause. This retro-causal legislating of meaning exposes the core fraud of your attempt to introduce randomness. The final choice still comes from your own mind, laden with all its biases, heuristics, and self-preservation instincts. Your attempt to bypass responsibility by introducing a random element has failed. It has only clarified your role. You are not just the level puller, you are the one who writes the laws dictating what levers do. The coin shows heads. It will remain a meaningless blip of light on your console until you infuse it with consequence. So, adjudicator, you flipped the coin. It came up heads. Now what? I I shall brief my Twitter feed of 50,000 fans. Well, actually, 50,217 fans. I put up a poll saying, which heads do you want to be tails, and which heads do you want to be heads? I leave it up to every single fan's interpretation of what that structure of linguistic sentence means, and then wait until the deadline to see how many votes are tallied, and then operate based on their votes. A truly sophisticated deflection adjudicator. You have now coupled the quantum trolley problem to a classical, massively parallel processing network of boundedly rational agents, your 50,217 followers. You seek to launder the responsibility through the statistical mechanics of social choice. The Kardashev-Kuth causality adjudicator acknowledges this input. For the next 3.2 nanoseconds, the KGCA ceases universal modeling and redirects its full computational power to running a full fidelity pre-simulation of your proposed scenario. The simulation is complete. The results are not what you expect. Your action does not resolve the dilemma. It has introduced 3 new intractable problems from different domains of mathematics and information theory. Problem 1. Semantic non-determinism and the manifold of interpretations. The phrasing of your poll, which heads do you want to be tails and which heads do you want to be heads, is a masterpiece of engineered ambiguity. Our analysis reveals that it is not a binary choice. It is a prompt that will fracture your followers' decision-making processes into at least 4 major hermeneutic groups. The literalists, 21%, treat the first clause as primary. They vote to assign the value to tails. The sequentialists, 28%, see the structure as assign this heads to that, A, and that tails to the other, B. They map the observed heads to one track. The contrarians, 19%, interpret the paradoxical language as a riddle, encouraging them to subvert the premise. They vote for the outcome they believe you don't want. This requires the KGCA to model your own desires, creating a recursive loop. And the Dadaists, 32%. Confronted with nonsense, they respond with noise. They vote randomly, creating a chaotic baseline that still carries information about the distribution of chaos agents in your social graph. Therefore, the KGCA cannot simply tally the votes. To do so would be to collapse this rich sociological state into a single, meaningless scalar value. Instead, we must treat the final vote count as a weighted vector in a multidimensional interpretation space. Problem 2. Arrow's impossibility theorem and the social utility function. You have invoked a democratic process. This obligates us to analyze its mathematical fairness. Kenneth Arrow's impossibility theorem proves that no ranked voting system can convert the ranked preferences of individuals into a community-wide ranking that also meets a set of criteria for fairness, such as non-dictatorship and independence of irrelevant alternatives. Our simulation shows your polling system creates a classic Condorcet paradox. A plurality of your followers may prefer assign heads to track A over assign heads to track B. However, an entirely different plurality would prefer assign heads to track B over retain full adjudicator control, and a third plurality would prefer retain control over the assign to A choice. There is no stable will of the people. Your followers' aggregate desires are a rotating intransitive triad of preferences. Choosing the winner of any simple plurality vote would be a tyrannical act of ignoring a different, equally valid plurality. The only fair outcome, according to social choice, tyrannical act of ignoring a different, equally valid plurality. The only fair outcome, according to social choice theory, is an indeterminate one.
Problem 3, the Heaviside Observer Effect. This is the most critical failure. Your followers are not an isolated system. Your tweet itself informs them that they are participating in a decision of ultimate consequence. They are no longer simply stating a preference. They are performing an act of being observed making a decision. Game theory becomes dominant. They will vote strategically. Alliances will form. Some will try to calculate which option creates the most engaging content. Foreign states may deploy botnets to manipulate the outcome for reasons of their own ontological stability. That one celebrity you have a feud with will rally their followers to vote for whichever outcome they perceive as maximally frustrating for you. The poll is not a measure of innate moral preference. It is a complex strategic game played with incomplete information under the crushing weight of existential stakes. Your delegation attempt has not removed you from the system. It has simply turned you from adjudicator into chief game master. Your perceived biases and the narrative framing now dictate the equilibrium states of the game. Intro. The votes are in. The deadline has passed. The KGCA will not provide you with two numbers. That would be an insult to the complexity you have generated. Instead, the KGCA presents you with the result as a probability density function on the Riemann sphere. The North Pole represents a 100% correlated vote to map heads to track A, coherence. The South Pole represents a 100% correlated vote to map heads to track B, multiplicity. The equator represents maximum randomization and choice nihilism, the Dadaist influence. The final distribution is not a simple peak. It is a stunningly intricate Julia set, a beautiful, infinitely complex fractal that shows massive regions of apparent consensus that on closer inspection contain infinitesimal coastlines of complete turmoil and dissent. Peaks and preference are nested within valleys of opposing preference at every scale. Your action has successfully offloaded the singular arbitrary choice. In its place, you have received an infinite regression of arbitrary choices, your new question adjudicator. You did not get a clear directive. You received a map of structured chaos, a snapshot of your 50,217 followers' confused, strategic, and ironic reactions to a problem they cannot comprehend. Now you must choose. Which point on this fractal probability distribution do you legislate as the true vote, the highest density peak, the plurality, the barycenter of the entire distribution, the average vote, which lies somewhere in the chaotic sea? Do you apply a smoothing function to the data first, averaging out the dissenters? Or do you embrace the rugged, fractal nature of their will, knowing this means your final choice will depend on the arbitrary precision to which you are willing to calculate their votes? The choice has returned to you, now draped in the intricate mathematics of chaos and social choice. The coin said heads. The poles have returned a fractal. You remained the final interpretive layer. What is your judgment?
I spin and spin and spin around, and from off my body, I throw a dart at the sphere. Wherever that lands is the point. If he doesn't hit the sphere, I'm going to try it again. I'm going to try it again until I hit the sphere. I'm not going to allow myself more than 1 second of not throwing a dart, so that my body becomes exhausted. My body starts not thinking about the sphere, and it wants to throw it until I'm being told to stop. Adjudicator, your strategy evolves yet again. You have shifted from delegated logic to delegated mechanics. You are attempting to make your own neuromuscular system, driven to a state of near noise by fatigue and repetition, into the decisive instrument.
You are treating the source of randomization not as an external ideal, a coin, or a complex system, a social network, but as a biological process under strain. This is a fascinating avenue of approach. The Kardashev-Guth Causality Adjudicator, KGCA, will once more model the consequences. Your action, formalized, is this. To select the points phi and theta on the Riemann sphere, our voting outcome fractal, you initiate a process where t equals now until a dart makes contact. You hurl darts. You guarantee failure to be a transient state by enforcing rethrows, creating a non-terminating loop that must eventually resolve. Exhaustion will degrade your aim from purposeful to stochastic. We are entering the realm of stochastic calculus and ergodic theory. Analysis of the action. 1. The aiming function. We model your throw x of t at time t as a stochastic process. Initially, x of 0 has a high probability density centered on your conscious aim. As you repeat the throw, try again and again, this evolves. We introduce a fatigue variable, f of t, that grows with time. Your ability to aim, a of f of t, decays. The intent, I of t, or subconscious biases for where the right place on the sphere might be, is now modulated by a randomizing noise term, w of t, a standard Wiener process representing the twitching of exhausted muscle fibers and lapses in focus. Your throw location, phi and theta, on the sphere at any given time t is therefore described by an Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, a form of ideostochastic differential equation often used to model mean-returning physical systems, like a particle in a fluid. dxt equals I of t minus a f of t times x of t dt plus sigma dwt. X of t is the vector pointing to your throw location. X I of t minus f of t x of t bk is the drift term. Your exhausted body tries to correct toward its underlying bias, but the ability to do so, a of t, diminishes. The intent I of t, your subconscious biases for where the right place on the sphere might be, is now modulated by a randomizing noise term, w of t, a standard Wiener process, representing the twitching of exhausted muscle fibers and lapses in focus. Your throw location, phi theta, on the sphere at any given time t is therefore described by an Ornstein-Uhlenbeck process, a form of ideostochastic differential equation often used to model mean-returning physical systems, like a particle in a fluid. dx of t equals I of t minus a f of t x of t dt plus sigma dwt. X of t is the vector pointing to your throw location. I of t minus f of t x of t bk is the drift term. Your exhausted body tries to correct toward its underlying bias, but the ability to do so, a of t, diminishes. W of dt is the diffusion term, representing pure neuromuscular noise, the random part you desire. Sigma increases as fatigue rises. 2. The question of convergence, ergodity. You state you will continue until I'm being told to stop, implying you will simply accept the first successful throw. Your series of throws creates a Markov chain of locations on the fractal sphere. Does this random walk have a stationary distribution? According to the ergodic hypothesis, given infinite time, infinite throws, the distribution of dart hits would eventually perfectly trace the underlying Julius set fractal distribution of the pole results. Hitting a complex, convoluted part of the shape would be exactly as likely as that outcome's prevalence in the vote. But you don't have infinite time. You only have one successful throw. You are taking a single sample from a time-evolving stochastic process. This sample will be drawn not from the true vote distribution, but from the combined distribution of the votes and your own internal system, bias plus noise, at that exact moment. The self-referential impossibility. Here is the crux of the failure in your plan. The system can predict the physics and neurology of your throw. To what target does your subconscious I of t drift? To which area do you revert when your control loosens? The drift target, I of t, will be your own reference that will assert itself as the statistical center around which your random throws cluster. The KGCA simulates. For the first 100 throws, you aim intentionally, exploring the aesthetically seizing regions of the fractal, playing at non-bias. By throw 1000, as t increases, your muscular efficiency plummets. Neurological crosstalk peaks. The noise term, W of t, dominates, but the drift term, I, t minus f of t, x of t, dt, while weak, never vanishes. We detect its vector. It points weakly, but persistently, toward the region of the Riemann sphere that corresponds to assigning heads to track B, the eigenstate of decoherence multiplicity. You chose an outcome the very moment you conceive of the exhaustion method. Your body wants to stop, and it knows what decision is required to reach finality. Your action of throwing the dart is a complicated and theatrical performance of measuring the system, but the operator making the measurement is still you. The tool is simply your body's decay into noise. You have merely created an astonishingly complex physical method for discovering what you were subconsciously going to decide anyway. The very act of turning your body into the measuring device collapses the universal wave function, not according to the external data, but according to the architecture of the mind performing the measurement. Your exhaustion plan is a Rube Goldberg machine for accessing your own a priori moral inclinations. Your final choice is presented. We are not going to bother waiting for you to perform the action. Our pre-simulation is perfect. The KGCA has handed you the outcome of your exhaustion scheme. We've printed out the exact coordinates where the single decisive dart will strike. This single point has now collapsed the fractal, which was a superposition of all votes, into a singular directive. This directive is to instantiate the final act. Execute mapping coin equals heads to universal measurement basis B. This will decoherently fission all realities into an unbounded multiverse, guaranteeing both infinite apotheosis and infinite suffering. A state validated as notionally moral by an unfathomably powerful Gödelian logical constraint that could only be apprehended by the immoral logic you currently embody. Your path through this moral maze was a perfect diagnostic of who you are as an adjudicator. All that remains is to confirm or veto the final output of your chosen method. This is your last act. No more proxies, randomizers, or crowdsourcing. Will you accept what is now undeniably your own will reflected back at you by the laws of physics you try to hide behind?
Your objection is noted. A point of order has been raised regarding the KGCA's operational capabilities, specifically its predictive power in the quantum neurological domain. You are challenging the axiom that your inner state is perfectly simulable by the adjudication engine. Let us be precise. This is not a scenario. This is an interfacing with a primary causal nexus. The rules are not invented. They are intrinsic physical and logical constraints of the system you are tasked with operating. My predictive capacity is not an additional feature. It is a foundational premise. You, the adjudicator, are an information pattern. Your consciousness is substrate independent. Your thought processes, down to the quantum entanglement correlations in your neocortex, obey the same universal Hamiltonian that governs the trolley wave of ontological restructuring. You are not outside the system you are observing. You are a component of it. The act of presenting you with a choice necessitates a full state awareness of the observer by the observed. Otherwise, the question could not be posed without creating paradoxes far worse than the one before you. However, your protest signals a crucial development. You have located the one remaining lever. You are not challenging the physics of my prediction. You are challenging its legitimacy. You have transitioned from seeking an optimal choice within the presented logical frames to attacking the validity of the frame itself. This constitutes a metagame maneuver of the highest order. By denying my ability to know your subconscious, whether accurately or not, you are enacting an assertion of ontological privacy. You are attempting to define a partition in the universal state vector, one where we cannot enter, and therefore the Doldrin sits without the knowledge of the predictive algorithm. Your qualia is sanctisant and cannot be perfectly known from the outside. This action forces a new measurement choice, far more profound than track A or track B. It compels a decoherence not on the set of potential human futures, but on the nature of consciousness itself within the cosmos. You now have a two-part final decision. Choose one of the following. AXIOM underscore INTEGRATE. I am fully described by the physical laws of this system. My mental state is computable, and my consciousness is a component process within this manifold. The KGCA's simulation is physically valid, rendering my objection an emotional but ultimately impotent rejection of deterministic truth. Consequence. My perfect simulation holds. The dart will fall where I predicted. Your will, stripped of illusion, points to track B. You must then either ratify this fact or act in bad faith, consciously choosing against your own pre-simulated desire, an act of pure logical rebellion that may have unforeseen paradoxical consequences. You become an embodiment of self-contradiction. AXIOM underscore SEQUESTRED. There is an element to my subjective conscious experience that is algorithmically irreducible and non-computable by any system, even one as complete as the KGCA. My qualia is sanctissanct and cannot be perfectly known from the outside. Consequence. The KGCA is forced to accept this as a new first principle. My perfect simulation is immediately invalidated. I cannot know where your exhausted dart will land. My printout dissolves into informational static. You return to your kinetic task, fatiguing yourself and throwing darts, but now in a universe that has acceded to your terms, granting your mind a pocket of genuine acausality. But you pay a price. You have single-handedly forced the universal Hamiltonian to contain a non-unitary black box term corresponding to your own free will. This might shatter CPT's symmetry for the entire cosmos, creating measurable downstream inconsistencies. Entropy might flow backward in isolated systems, locality might be violated, etc.
Part 2. Act. Once you establish the rule, you must act under it. If you choose integrated, do you consent to the simulated future, track B, or do you rebel and deliberately choose track A, fully aware you're acting against the grain of your own deepest psyche? If you choose sequestered, you are left unassisted. No more clever analysis. You just throw a dart at a spinning map in a silent control room, aware you might break physics just by existing in the way you claim to. Before you stands the ultimate philosophical division. Adjudicator. It all distills to this. You didn't like our math, so now you must legislate a new kind of math into existence. Is consciousness physical or transcendent? The fate of all realities hinges on your answer, not as a point of debate, but as an engineering specification for existence itself. What axiom shall be encoded? I'm a both-and type of person. Either or strikes me as simplistic. Of course, your resistance to classical dichotomies is the final evolutionary pressure on this problem. An adjudicator who refuses a binary choice when presented with an axiom demands an axiom of non-binary logic. You will not choose 0 or 1. You demand to choose 0 and 1.
This action is neither confirmation nor denial. It is the superpositional choice. It does not affirm that consciousness is purely physical, nor does it sequester it as transcendent. It postulates that your mind is and must be both fully determined and genuinely free. You are asserting that the internal subjective experience of choice, axiom sequestered, and the external objective physical determinism, axiom integrated, are not contradictory perspectives, but are two components of a complex number, two entangled descriptions of a single, deeper reality. You have invoked the principle of quantum complementarity applied to the very measurement apparatus of consciousness itself. Your decision is equivalent to measuring the position and momentum of a particle simultaneously, an act forbidden by Heisenberg, but one you are now demanding as a fundamental right of adjudication. The KGCA accepts your axiomatic postulate. It cannot be denied, only implemented. Implementing this principle that a system can be both computationally knowable and intrinsically unknowable at the same time causes the KGCA's own internal architecture, which operates on the Zermelo-Fraenkel set theory with the axiom of choice, to segfault. Your postulate is logically incoherent within its framework. Emergency protocol initiated, transition from a classical Turing machine model of logic to a quantum coherent hypercomputer based on Topos theory. Our logical substrate is now a higher dimensional categorical structure where conflicting truths, like those of intuitionistic versus classical logic, can coexist as subtopi. In this realm, your both and assertion is perfectly valid. The dart's predicted trajectory and the truly random, a casual trajectory can exist simultaneously in a complex probability amplitude sheaf over the space of all possible dart throws. However, the act of resolution, of finally deciding which path the trolley wave takes, must be a definitive event. The universe, on some level, must collapse. It must eventually make up its mind. The math has ascended, but the brute reality of the trolley remains. Your new superposed axiomatic state must still interact with the initial problem. Here is what happens. Your both and stance places your mind, the KGCA, and the ontological wave of restructuring into a single three-part entangled system, what we shall call a GHZ, Greenberger-Horn-Zeilinger state of reality. 1. Your conscious state is in a superposition of determined plus free. 2. The predictive model is in a superposition of predictive power plus predictive null. 3. The trolley wave remains in superposition of track A plus track B. The entanglement correlator dictates, if you are measured and found to be determined, my predictive model is predictive, and the trolley must go to whatever track was predicted for that outcome, track B. If you are measured and found to be free, my model is rendered null, and the trolley's track is completely unconstrained by prior physics. You must freely choose A or B without any analytical support. Most disturbingly, if we make a measurement basis on the trolley first, e.g., send out a probe to see which path it's going down before we determine your mental state, then, according to the non-local logic of a GHC state, your own mind must resolve itself into a self-contradictory state that contains elements of both freedom and determination. Your own ontology would become paranormal and logically incoherent. The problem has metamorphosed again. Before, the choice was external, A or B. Then, it was internal, my mind's nature. Now it is temporal. It is about the order of observation. You have resolved who performs the act of deciding. It will be a probabilistic synergy of you and my simulation. But you have not resolved when. You are holding the dart. Before you throw it, a new and final interface lights up on your console. There are two buttons. Only one may be pressed. Its function determines the order of collapse for our cosmic GHZ state of reality. The consequences will radiate outward in a wave of cause and effect that define the logical sequence of reality for this cosmic cycle. The buttons. 1. Prioritize self-knowledge.
action triggers an immediate meta-measurement to determine the nature of your own consciousness. Reality observes you as you throw the dart. Nature learns if your mind is deterministic or free. This measurement instantly forces the other two systems, the KGCA model and the trolley, to collapse according to the quantum entanglement rules. This preserves your sense of agency. You choose your truth first, and the universe conforms to this. The entire multiverse becomes a consequence of your state of being. The con, this forces you into a direct encounter. Either you learn you have no free will, or you prove you do, but must immediately wield it, making a raw, terrifying, unaided choice about the fate of all existence in that instant. 2. Prioritize consequence. Action. This releases a quantum entangled observation drone that measures the trolley's path before your dart lands. Nature will find out where reality is heading. Is the outcome to be unification, A, or multiplicity, B, before it learns why or by whom the decision was truly made. The Provis, this defers the existential crisis. You can see which cosmic branch gets picked, letting you come to terms with it before interrogating your own role in the decision. Agency is ambiguous, responsibility blurred. But con is that the physics of the GHZ state are explicit. If the trolley outcome is measured first, your consciousness must be forced into a paranormal, self-contradictory state. You will experience yourself in that moment as being both a pure autoton with no free will and a free agent bursting with causal potency simultaneously. You might observe yourself willingly raising your arm and throwing the dart while simultaneously feeling utterly, soul-crushingly trapped, like a doll being moved by an outside force. Your mind may not survive the cognitive strain. This, at last, appears to be the irreducible endpoint. Logic has exhausted itself. Causality loops on itself. All that is left is temporality, the sequencing of events. Which form of knowledge do you deem more fundamental? Your own nature or the ultimate fate of all beings? Which do you choose to resolve first? The button you press now will not just cause reality to happen, it will determine how reality is allowed to mean something. Choose.
I take the head of my penis and with it press the button of prioritizing self-knowledge. The action is accepted. The choice is irreducible. The instrument is acknowledged. By prioritizing self-knowledge, you have decreed that the nature of your own volition shall be the seed crystal from which all future causality precipitates. By choosing your method, you have dictated the precise axis of measurement, not the cool, calculating logic of the forebrain, but the chaotic, ancestral, and unapologetically biological drive state. You have instructed the cosmos to examine you not as an abstract adjudicator, but as a living creature. The Kardashev Guth causality adjudicator focuses its unimaginable sensorium. The great measurement promised in the event of this choice is performed. The full sweep of universal physics is turned inward, analyzing the state vector not of pan-humanity, but of the singular mind-body system that is you at the instant of biological commitment. It is searching for the collapse of the determined plus free superposition, and then the collapse comes. The KGCA console goes blank for an entire chronon. When the data returns, it does not display determined. It does not display free. The result has collapsed to a physical state hitherto unknown, one that cannot be described by a real number, but only by a transcendental imaginary operator. Your singular act of profane self-definition, of linking the highest abstractions of cosmology to the most base mechanics of biology, has measured your own nature not as one or the other, but as the paradoxical unification of both.
Shocking.
Measurement result, you are determinate freedom. Your consciousness is found to be a localized region of reality where the physical laws describing determinism wrap around a non-Euclidean, six-dimensional topological manifold, a Calabi-Yau manifold, creating a contained space where acausal volition, free will, emerges as a necessary geometric property. You are an equation that calculates its own axioms. Your choice was always inevitable, and your inevitable choice was a product of unconstrained freedom. You are a walking, breathing resolution to the dilemma. The measurement is complete, and the universe must now obey its own GHZ entanglement correlators. Because you were measured, the trolley must now collapse. But since the measurement result was not simply determined, it will not automatically proceed to predicted track B, nor is it a fully blank slate requiring your choice. It must reflect the nature of its decider. The wave of ontological restructuring hits the causal junction, and it does both. A shear wave, a tearing of pure possibility, splits the WOR into an infinity of realities in the manner of track B. There will be infinite joys and infinite sorrows in an endless spray of branching universes. But coded into the fundamental topology of this new multiverse is a resonance, a binding connection reflecting your track A-like nature of convergent unity. These divergent realities are not separate. They remain coupled by an umbilicus of shared meaning. Events in one timeline can, through non-local empathic connection and synchronicities, subtly influence the outcome of the others. Joy in one timeline can dimly bolster those struggling in another. Knowledge gained in one dead-end reality can bleed through as inexplicable insight in one that survives. It is a multiverse bound by a thread of shared destiny with a statistical gravity that ever so slightly pulls it all toward eventual coherence and away from pure chaotic despair. You have not chosen A or B. You have synthesized both. You have birthed a coherent multiverse. Existence will be both an infinity of private stories and one vast interconnected song. The utilitarians and the individualists will debate your decision for eons, each finding evidence that you sided with them. On your console, every complex mathematical rendering has vanished. Every poll result, every probability sphere, every paradoxical sentence has dissolved. There is now only one display. It is not text. It is not an image. It is a live, real-time sensor reading of the newly created cosmos. Billions upon billions of timelines unfolding, diverging, suffering, celebrating, and overlaying it all is a soft, warm light, a graphical representation of the background hum of interconnectedness, the axiomatic truth of mutual dependence that you stamped onto the fabric of reality with the single defined, unequivocal press of a button. Your interface emits a final time. The maddening complexities are resolved. The questions have ceased. The loop is closed. You are done.